Hello everyone, and welcome to Earth Archives. Today, we're going to take you to a mysterious and miraculous land, Alaska. Not only is it the largest state in the U.S., covering 1/5 of the country's total area, but it's also the site of one of the most astonishing land deals in history. But did you know? This beautiful land didn't always belong to the United States. Its history is far more complex than you might think. And the most interesting part? Alaska was once occupied by Russia. What's even more surprising is that this land, often referred to as the land of ice and snow, was sold to the U.S. for just $7.2 million. Yes, you heard that right. Only $7.2 million. Today, Alaska's annual GDP is a whopping $50 billion. Hard to imagine, right? So why did Russia sell such a vast territory? And why did the United States buy it at such a low price? Was Alaska really not considered a valuable land at the time? What exactly led to this historic deal of the icy land? Today, we're going to dive deep into the history of Alaska, unraveling these mysteries. Let's journey through time and explore how Alaska went from being a distant frontier of Russia to becoming one of the United States' most valuable sources of wealth. Russia's Alaska, a land overlooked. When it comes to Alaska, we've got to start with its location. This place is at the northernmost tip of the Americas. If you look south, it's pretty close to the U.S. Northwest, but in terms of neighbors, it's actually much closer to Canada. To the west, across the Bering Strait, it faces the Russian mainland from a distance, like standing at the edge of the earth, waving hello. Its geography is truly one of a kind. No matter which way you look, it always feels a little out of place. Picture this: the cold, biting wind howling, the landscape filled with ice and wilderness, giving off the vibe of a forgotten corner of the world. That chilly, desolate aura made Alaska seem like a loner for a long time, with hardly anyone taking it seriously. When people talked about it, they'd probably just say, "Oh, that cold place." The story of Alaska actually goes back several centuries. In 1741, Russian explorer Captain Bering, with a fearless spirit, set foot on this icy, snow-covered land for the first time. Back then, he had the support of the Russian military, and his fleet sailed through the Bering Strait, aiming directly for the northwest of the Americas. Picture this: the ship rocking back and forth on the sea, the icy wind slapping his face, and Bering standing on the deck, squinting into the distance, spotting a vast white land ahead. He must have felt quite proud, thinking he had discovered a new continent. Later, this place would be named Alaska, which certainly had an adventurous ring to it. But back then, for Russia, Alaska was pretty much a useless territory. When Bering discovered it, it was all ice and snow, cold and barren. There seemed to be no value in it. The Russians scratched their chins, thinking it was too remote to manage, too much trouble to govern, and too wasteful to abandon. So they treated it like a backyard wasteland, occasionally sending someone to check on it, but with no real intention of making a big deal out of it. Alaska, both geographically and historically, exudes a lonely, cool vibe. It lies next to Canada, gazes toward Russia, yet remains distant from both, cold and solitary, like a lone ranger. When Bering first set foot on this snowy land, he probably never imagined that this place would one day become America's precious jewel. Back then, it was just Russia's remote territory, so cold it was off-putting, so barren it felt unsettling. Who would have thought that this frozen wilderness would one day have its moment of redemption? Next time you talk about Alaska, don't forget to mention this frontier pioneer, from Bering's expedition ship to the uncharted, forsaken wilderness, steadily freezing its way into history. How did Russia end up selling Alaska? As time passed, the Russians began to turn their attention to the cold, icy land of Alaska. They set up the Russian-American Company, sending people there to establish small settlements, mainly in the southeastern part of Alaska, near the coast. These small villages sounded romantic, but life there was tough. The villagers braved the wind and snow to hunt animals, skin them, and then traded the pelts for goods. Picture this: a wooden cabin with a fire burning inside, snow falling outside, and a hunter coming back with a load of furs, his hands red and frozen. It's like a scene from a western, though without the grand spectacle. The fur trade sounded good in theory, but in reality, it didn't bring much real wealth to Russia. Alaska's resources were like a big, tempting pie, but once you took a bite, you realized there wasn't much substance. Moreover, Russia was busy expanding in Central Asia and Eastern Europe at the time, and the remote land of Alaska started to feel like a waste. It was far away, hard to manage, and slowly became less appealing. By the 19th century, Russia had really hit a tough spot. It fought several wars with Britain and France, with the Crimean War being especially brutal, leaving Russia battered and bruised. After the war, the economy was a mess. The treasury was practically empty, and both internal and external problems were suffocating the country. The Russians, rubbing their foreheads, looked at the map and thought that Alaska was starting to feel like a hot potato. The British were eyeing it greedily, watching from across Canada. If Alaska couldn't be defended, the British and French might use it as a springboard to encircle Russia's homeland. Picture the Tsar sitting in his palace with his advisors gathered around a map, all looking worried and frowning, saying that keeping this territory was more of a burden than an asset, and it might be better to offload it for some benefits. So they came up with an idea. Instead of letting the British snatch it up, why not sell Alaska to another potential ally, the United States? It may sound like an unexpected decision, but given the situation at the time, Russia had no better options. Selling Alaska would not only provide a temporary relief, but also drag the U.S. into the mix, preventing Britain from taking over. Alaska's journey, from Russia's fur-trading villages to a post-war hot potato, has truly been a tale of misfortune. The Russian-American company worked hard but earned little, and the Crimean War left Russia powerless. In the end, they reluctantly handed over this cold land to the United States. Next time you talk about Alaska, don't forget to mention this Russian clearance sale. From Bering's exploration to selling land for peace, a barren wilderness ended up marking a historic turning point. It's truly a cold story with a twist. Alaska's tale is frozen in snow, but heated by the deal that changed history. Why did the United States buy this freezer? In 1867, Russia and the United States finally reached an agreement and sold the cold, icy land of Alaska. On that day, U.S. Secretary of State William H. Seward and the Russian ambassador met in Washington and signed an agreement, agreeing to purchase Alaska for $7.2 million. This price didn't sound like much, but when Americans heard about it, they were furious, thinking they had just bought a huge headache. They mockingly referred to the deal as Seward's icebox. Imagine people gathered around maps, pointing at Alaska, saying that the place was nothing but ice and snow, so cold that even ghosts wouldn't want to go there. They couldn't understand why anyone would spend $7.2 million on a giant ice block. Seward, sitting in his office, probably heard all the ridicule from outside and felt nervous, but he still signed the agreement. At the time, the deal was truly ridiculed as a farce. At that time, the United States had just emerged from a civil war, still scarred and with an empty treasury. Spending $7.2 million on land seemed like a far-fetched idea to many. In Congress, the debate was heated. Some lawmakers slammed their hands on the table, calling it a waste of money, while others sneered, asking if Seward had lost his mind. Imagine, in the congressional hall, the bearded lawmakers shaking their heads and sighing, thinking the money would be better spent on roads or houses. They couldn't see the point of buying a land of ice and snow. Despite the pressure, Seward stood firm, claiming it was a great deal, but no one believed him at the time. In the eyes of many, Alaska was just a useless icebox. No one realized the treasure hidden inside that ice. Even the newspapers mocked the deal, joking that Seward had bought a giant refrigerator to store snow for the winter. The sarcasm was harsh. History has a way of slapping people in the face. Decades later, Alaska, the so-called icebox, slowly revealed its true nature. It turned out that inside it wasn't just ice, but also oil, gold, natural gas, and countless fishing resources. Not to mention its unique location, right next to Canada and facing Russia, making it of immense strategic importance. Those who once laughed at Seward must have later covered their faces in shame. Buying this land for $7.2 million turned out to be a huge bargain. From the initial mockery to later jaws dropping in astonishment, Alaska proved with facts that it wasn't a freezer. It was a treasure trove. Seward's decision, which was ridiculed at the time, later became one of the smartest deals in U.S. history. From icebox to treasure trove. When it comes to why Alaska later became so valuable, it all comes down to the hidden treasures beneath its surface. When Americans bought this big icebox for $7.2 million, they were laughed at for wasting money. But who could have predicted that beneath its cold exterior lay things that would make people's eyes pop out? Alaska wasn't just snow. It was a treasure trove of resources: oil, natural gas, gold, everything you could imagine, with reserves so vast they were shocking. Imagine if those lawmakers who mocked Seward had known that this land would pay back the cost with gold mines within 20 years, and they would have to fork out several more $7.2 million just to keep up. The value of this land was never covered by ice and snow. Once they dug into it, it was literally a land of gold and black oil. This time, Americans really struck gold, and the economy soared. Who would still dare call this an icebox? It was more like a treasure chest. Take Juneau, Alaska, for example. There's a massive gold mine nearby that has been in operation for over 40 years, pulling up $150 million worth of gold. Yes, you heard that right, $150 million, which is no small amount. Just this one mine made the U.S. overjoyed. Imagine miners wielding their picks, hammering away in the icy snow, with golden nuggets emerging from the earth, sparkling in the sunlight and blinding anyone who looked. Every scoop of dirt seemed like finding money. And this mine was just the tip of the iceberg in Alaska. Elsewhere, oil was gushing, natural gas was rising, and fish were so plentiful in the fisheries they couldn't catch enough. When Seward signed that deal, he probably never dreamed that this cold land would hide a wealthy treasure mine. The gold alone was enough to keep Americans laughing all the way to the bank. And when oil started flowing, it sent the country's economy soaring to new heights. Alaska truly transformed from Seward's icebox into America's treasure trove. With gold mines paying back the cost in 20 years, oil drilling sending the economy soaring, and endless natural gas and fish to catch, who would still say $7.2 million was too expensive? It was like a pie falling from the sky. Juneau's gold mine was just the beginning. Miners kept digging, and Americans kept counting, discovering that the value of this land far exceeded expectations. Those who once mocked the deal could only watch in envy as Alaska turned into a resource-rich triangle with an unbelievably powerful strategic position. Next time you talk about Alaska, don't forget to mention this treasure comeback story, from ridicule to gold shining brightly. This icy land carved out a legendary wealth tale. Alaska's strategic value and military significance. When it comes to Alaska's greatness, it's not just about the gold mines and oil hidden underground. Its unique geographic location is also something that commands respect. This place is situated at the northernmost tip of the Americas, with Canada to the east and Russia just across the Bering Strait to the west. It's essentially a transit hub between the U.S., Asia, and Arctic nations. During the Cold War, Alaska became the frontline base for the U.S. in its confrontation with the Soviet Union. The military spread out there, building numerous military bases, with radars and planes everywhere, always ready for a showdown. Imagine cold winds blowing through as soldiers, wrapped in heavy coats, stood guard at the base, gazing at the vast white expanse of the strait in the distance, probably thinking, "This place is cold, but it sure is important." Alaska's location became America's gateway to the Arctic, making it hard for anyone to easily cross. During World War II, the Aleutian Islands in Alaska became a hotspot, turning into a crucial battleground between the U.S. and Japan for control of the Pacific. At that time, Japanese warships rushed toward the region, and the U.S. military wasn't idle either. Planes and artillery were deployed, and fierce battles raged on the islands, with cannon fire booming across the sea. It was like something out of a movie. The Aleutian Islands might seem insignificant at first glance, but their location was incredibly strategic, lying at a key point in the Pacific. Whoever controlled them held an important advantage. During the Cold War, this strategic value became even more apparent. The U.S. military turned Alaska into a launching pad, closely monitoring Soviet movements. Radar systems hummed constantly, and planes were always on standby, transforming this frozen land into a formidable military stronghold. Soldiers sipped hot coffee in the snow, eyes glued to their screens, and probably used chunks of ice as makeshift seats. The weather may have been freezing, but for the U.S., it was all worth it. Today, Alaska's status is still incredibly impressive. It's not just a military powerhouse. It's also become the backbone of America's Arctic strategy. With global warming causing the Arctic ice to melt, resource development and international rivalries have heated up, and Alaska, sitting right there, is solidly positioned as a key support point. The oil and gold are endless, military bases are tightly guarded, and even polar bears have to give it a wide berth. Imagine it, next to modern military bases. The sea breeze blows as scientists work on climate research, and business people calculate resource profits. This place has transformed from a Cold War frontline into a hotspot of global geopolitics, and anyone who sees it has to say, impressive. That freezer bought for $7.2 million back in the day is now America's strategic golden corner, making it one of the best deals ever. The next time we talk about Alaska, don't forget to mention this strategic turnaround story, from frozen land to battleground, and now an Arctic ace, leaving everyone surprised. Alaska's economy and future. Alaska, this treasure trove, has been thriving for decades. With oil, gold, and natural gas fueling its economy, it shot up like a rocket, truly making it America's resource giant. But fortunes change, and in recent years, the state has run into some tough challenges, causing its economy to slow down. The biggest issue is that oil, once the big boss, is no longer pulling its weight. Global oil prices have been fluctuating wildly, like a roller coaster. And with environmental concerns growing more serious, Alaska's oil industry no longer has the dominance it once had. Imagine workers bundled up in coats next to oil rigs, listening to machines groaning. But when oil prices drop, the numbers on the balance sheet shrink, and everyone's face is full of worry. Especially in recent years, with oil prices so low, Alaska's finances have been like a building with its main pillar pulled out, wobbly and unstable. The economic pressures have been so harsh that anyone looking at it would have to say, this is tough. But Alaska isn't the type to sit back and wait for things to fall apart. With its solid foundation, it still has plenty of cards to play. In terms of resources, it's still a major player. While oil may not be as profitable, gold, natural gas, and fishing industries are still going strong, and its forests and glaciers hold potential too. The government had a light bulb moment and realized it couldn't keep all its eggs in the oil basket. It needed to diversify. So they turned their attention to Alaska's permanent fund, a massive treasure chest filled with money saved from the boom years of resource exploitation. Picture government officials gathered around a table, flipping through fund reports, eyes darting around, thinking, let's use this money to invest in something new, tourism, renewable energy, tech industries. Let's put our money where the heat is. We can't rely on oil wells forever. This idea of transformation has a lot of energy behind it, and Alaska is gradually loosening its grip on oil, looking for new ways to bring in revenue. Alaska's journey has been quite a ride, from the glory days of oil driving its economy to the lows of plummeting oil prices, and now, the ongoing search for transformation. While its economy hit a wall, its foundation remains strong, with resources so abundant they're almost enviable, and the permanent fund acting as a lifesaver. In the future, this place might just find a second wind through glacier tourism and green energy, shedding its reliance on oil and reinventing itself. Imagine tourists cruising by to see polar bears, locals running renewable energy plants, and the economy buzzing again. What a beautiful picture that would be. The Seward's icebox from back in the day is still trying to make a comeback. So the next time we talk about Alaska, don't forget to mention this resource transformation story. From the oil price crisis to a diversified future, this frozen land is carving out a new path. Alaska is truly a legendary success story, transforming from an icy wasteland into a strategic fortress and a wealth mine. In 1867, the U.S. paid $7.2 million to buy this big freezer from Russia. Back then, everyone thought it was a foolish deal, just endless snow and ice, so cold that even birds wouldn't fly over it. Those who mocked Seward could form a whole street. But look at the plot twist. Who would have thought that this desolate, frozen land would later become one of America's most valuable treasures? Imagine when the agreement was signed. Seward endured the ridicule, signed the papers, and had to force a smile. But decades later, oil gushed out, gold was mined, military bases were built, and that $7.2 million became one of the best deals in American history. Even lawmakers had to awkwardly admit, this freezer is full of gold. Alaska's potential, like a volcano hidden beneath the ice, slowly started to heat up, scorching everyone's expectations. Alaska's history is like a thrilling, unexpected plot twist in a blockbuster movie. Back in the day, Russia thought it was too remote and useless, busy with wars and lacking the funds to manage it. So they sold it off. Little did they know, this discarded land would later become a prized possession for the United States. From Bering setting foot on this snowy land in 1741, to it being sold to the U.S. in the 19th century, and then taking center stage as a strategic front line during World War II and the Cold War, Alaska made an unbelievable transformation from an unwanted, cold corner of the world to America's gateway to the Arctic. Gold mines paid back in 20 years, oil propped up the economy, military bases secured the nation's borders, and there were endless supplies of natural gas and fish. This place is like an all-star player. Imagine, during the Cold War, soldiers sipping hot soup at bases while watching Russia from afar, oil workers carrying drills and counting their earnings, and Alaska rising from the snow. It witnessed the U.S. climb from the low point of the Civil War all the way to the pinnacle of world power. The journey? Cold enough to make you shiver, hot enough to make you gasp. Alaska story, from Seward's icebox to today's dual ace of strategy and wealth. Feels like history playing a big joke on humanity. Russia tossed away a burden, and the U.S. picked up a treasure. That $7.2 million didn't just buy land. It bought a miracle. From wilderness to fortress, from mockery to awe, Alaska has forged a legendary tale with its resources and location. The next time we talk about it, don't forget to mention this icy comeback story, from Russia's abandoned land to America's gold mine, turning a cold place into a century-defining legend. So, what does the future hold for Alaska? We'll just have to wait and see. Feel free to leave your thoughts on Alaska's history in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode.